In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing this show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube. Hello and welcome to the Perspectrum. I'm Michael Bloom.
And I'm Nathan Seelove.
We have a very exciting and a bit nerdy episode for you this evening, which I think will be really fun. We're going to be starting off by talking about the Senate. I know we've been focused so much on the presidential race for the last few episodes. That's kind of the big one. One thing that's been a monster lurking in the background has been the 2024 Senate races, which will decide control of the Senate. And so we want to break down the map, talk about our predictions, talk about what we think is going to happen. And of course, whenever we do these election predictions, Nathan and I, we don't talk ahead of time, in detail about what we're thinking. So you'll hear us hash out race by race how we think things are going to turn out. And then for our second segment, we want to tackle DEI. This has been a talking point by the right wing for the last few years. It has become, a bit of like the boogeyman for that side. So we want to talk about it, talk about why it's actually valuable and important and useful, and why it isn't really at all the boogeyman that Republicans are pretending that it is.
Yep. And I'm excited about both of these segments. These are quintessential Perspectrum nerding the hell out.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I love it.
Let's talk about the Senate map, and let's talk about rhetoric and terms, definitions, and social policy. That is classic Perspectrum. Okay.
Yep.
So let's get into it. I'm excited. I think we get a lot to talk about. So let's jump into the Senate.
All right, let's jump into the Senate. So, shit doesn't look good for Democrats, by the way.
Yes.
At least the way the map is set up for
Totally.
this particular Senate race, for this particular ride around, things do not look good for Democrats. There are a lot of Democratic seats in swing states that where there are Democratic incumbents, and let me put it this way. The best chance that the Democrats have of flipping a seat is in Texas.
Yeah, it's true. But
that is our best chance.
It's hopeful. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, structurally, it's a tough year for Democrats as is. So there are 34 seats up for election in the Senate. 10 of those seats are held by Republicans. 19 are held by Democrats, and 4 are held by independents who caucus with Democrats. So basically, we're talking about the opportunity to lose 24 seats or 23 seats from the Democratic side and 10 seats from the Republican side. And then there's a special election in there. So we're talking about, this is really risky. I mean, in a country that's super sharply divided, if you just said, hey, every election's a toss-up and it's 50-50, that would land the Republicans with 55 seats and the Democrats with 45 seats. Now, that's not what's going to happen, and that's what we're going to dive into. But structurally, this map is rough for us. And then on top of that, there's all of the individual race dynamics that Nathan started to touch on, where we've got, incumbents, a lot of incumbents on the Democratic side leaving. So we lose some of that advantage. We've got people in swing states, and to Nathan's point, not a lot of opportunities for pickups.
Yeah. So let's separate this out into safe states, likely states, lean states, and toss-ups.
Sure.
So let's start with safe states for the Democrats. Washington, safe state for the Democrats.
For sure.
California, safe state for the Democrats. New Mexico, safe state for the Democrats.
Yep.
New Jersey, safe state for the Democrats. New York, safe state for the Democrats. Vermont, safe state for the independent who caucuses with a Democrat. Maine, safe state for the independent who caucuses with the Democrat. Rhode Island, safe state for the Democrat. Connecticut, safe state for the Democrat. Delaware, safe state for the Democrat.
Yeah.
So those are all the. Oh, and Minnesota, safe state for the Democrat.
Yeah.
So those are the safe states where it's like there's not even really much to talk about, honestly.
Yeah.
Like for Republicans, North Dakota, safe state.
Mm-hmm.
Wyoming, safe state.
Yep.
Utah, safe state.
Wait, can we talk about Utah for a second? I know there's not a lot to talk
Sure.
about here, but this is crazy. There's not like a lot of polling or anything here, but I was looking at Utah and I was looking at the primary results. So, with Mitt Romney leaving his seat, there's no incumbent. So there's a primary for both Democrats and Republicans. In the primary, the Republican leader, John Curtis, got in the Republican primary 207,000 votes, and the next closest guy got 140,000 votes. In the Democratic primary, Caroline Gleach, who is the leader with 93% of the vote for the Democratic primary, guess how many votes? What's the count of her votes, Nathan? What do you think?
I assume it's probably less than 100,000. I'd say maybe 80.
80,000?
Yeah.
It is 795.
Oh shit.
Like less than 1,000 people voted in the Democratic primary in
shit.
Utah. And upwards of 300,000 voted in the Republican primary in Utah. So yeah, it's safe for Republicans.
That's safe for Republicans.
Isn't that insane? Those numbers blew my mind.
Wow. Wait, there are 700 Democrats in Utah?
That's the thing. I would think there'd be more. What about all those skiers? Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going. Utah's safe for the Republicans, for sure.
Very safe.
Yeah, very safe.
Nebraska, safe.
Yep.
Missouri, safe. Tennessee, safe. Mississippi, safe. Indiana, safe. And West Virginia, safe, and also a flip. Because the incumbent is Joe Manchin, who is not seeking re-election, who, he's a Republican in Democrats' clothing, but he is a vote for the majority leader, which does end up having a lot of pull. So that is a seat that is just gone. It doesn't matter who the Democrat is, doesn't matter who the Republican is. That seat's gone to the Republican. So we have our first flip.
Yeah, it's crazy. Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, is leading by 30 points in West Virginia, which is crazy in that seat. Yeah, absolutely nuts.
Oh, which is funny because he used to be a Democrat.
Oh, really?
He actually used to be a Democrat, but he changed to be a Republican when Trump was elected.
Sure. Yeah.
Because everybody likes to get on the Titanic after it hits the iceberg.
Amazing.
I mean, I get it. I get it. Trump is popular in West Virginia, but come on.
I mean, it's just so bold-faced. But the fact that he's 30 points ahead means people, I guess, believe him, or maybe it's just you need to be the Republican on the ticket. Who knows?
All right. Now let's talk about the likely states. There are 2 likely Democratic states and 2 likely Republican states. So the first likely Democratic state is our home state, good old Virginia. Well, Commonwealth. The Commonwealth of Virginia.
That is so ignorant and insulting of you.
Honestly, I don't even know if there's really much to say about this. Tim Kaine is super popular in Virginia.
Yeah.
The only reason why this is in the likely and not the solid safe category is because we do have a Republican governor.
Yeah.
But so there really isn't much of a unified opposition against Tim Kaine at this point.
Totally.
I was looking at, apparently there's this one Republican candidate, I forget the guy's name, who is running for primary, because I don't think the primary's happened yet, who was straight up saying he was running to prevent witchcraft from taking hold in Virginia the way it has in California. And also, there was this other interview that he did where he actually made the claim that no one's ever died from lack of access to healthcare.
Oh my God. Wow. Those are
So that's the type of shit that
You don't
Republicans are
think
putting out there.
anti-witches is a unified front, Nathan? Yeah, I mean, Tim Kaine, yeah, super popular, fixture of Democratic politics, a huge amount of name ID, polling ahead of like Republicans. And to your point, again, people are like sometimes concerned about Virginia being purplish, especially when we put up a Republican in the governor's mansion. But Terry McAuliffe ran a particularly terrible campaign and was a particularly terrible candidate, and we don't have to rehash that election. But there's a reason why he lost, and it's not that Virginia is a lean red type state. So yeah, I think you're right about Virginia.
Yeah. Whereas Tim Kaine is, an extremely popular senator, and a fairly decent candidate, decent enough candidate. So I think it's safe to go ahead and say that that's going to the Democrat.
Yep.
Then we have Maryland. And the only reason why Maryland is in the likely category instead of the solid category is because the Republican is Governor Hogan, who is the very popular Republican governor of Maryland.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, he became really popular during his response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He did a pretty good job of handling the state, including getting them like extra PPE. And he's also like been pretty unwilling to kowtow to Trump. And so for like, more centrist independent type folks, he becomes a pretty attractive candidate. Nevertheless, Angela Alsobrooks is still polling like 8 to 11 points ahead. Now there's not a ton of polling, but like I imagine with like Harris at the top of the ticket, that's going to just increase in margin, not go the other way. So I think that is also likely Democratic.
Yeah. In terms of likely Republican, we have the first one is Florida.
Yeah.
Florida is one of those states that, the Obama won it twice.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've only gone downhill.
Yeah.
And like Democrats have just been consistently burned in Florida over and over again, despite how hard they try to get Florida. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Democrats, but I know that Florida's the dick state, but it's never gonna fuck you. So move on.
No, I think you're totally right. I don't see any positive signs coming out of Florida. I mean, I'm not an expert, but the closest thing is that Rick Scott, who's the incumbent senator, is only leading Debbie Marcasso Powell by like 4 points or so in recent polls, which is, I guess, closer than you'd think. But it just hasn't, like, where we see like some red states getting tired with MAGA policies, getting pushed away from voting for Republicans because of Dobbs, like all of these things in other places. We did not see that in Florida. Like in the midterms in 2022, like after Dobbs, accounting for all that backlash and stuff, DeSantis still won by 20 fucking points and like swept pretty much the entire state. Like there were some districts that were blue, but barely. Like, this is not a question. There's no like right now, Florida is not in the mix.
Yeah. So that brings us to good old Tejas, Texas.
Yeah, no kidding. Texas is interesting.
Texas is interesting because it definitely has been slowly trending in a blue-ish direction, but I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is going to be the election where it is. So Ted Cruz is the current incumbent. Now, a lot of you will probably recall he actually came closer than he rightfully should have to being defeated the last time around. Beto O'Rourke was within like 2 points of him.
Yeah.
Now, some things to consider about Beto O'Rourke. At the time, he kind of destroyed everything that made him authentic and unique later. But at the time, he was this authentic, new candidate that visited every single county in Texas, which are a lot of them. And he actually was able to sway a good amount of the electorate. Like the governor in that same race won by like double digits. who was a Republican. So Beto O'Rourke was a particularly strong candidate. That's why he came so close to getting Ted Cruz. And as it stands, Ted Cruz, he doesn't have the greatest approval rating in terms of senators, but it's still above water. He has totally. According to Morning Consult, on average, he has a 48% approval rating to a 43% disapproval rating.
Yeah.
So, it's like less than 50%, but still not bad.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think he has established himself as like a fixture of the Republican Party. And honestly, over the last couple of years, like relative to when he was like running for president and stuff like that, has kept a, lower profile, less MAGA, less crazy profile than some of his colleagues. And so like people think he's a douche, but like they're generally seem fine with him. Now, his challenger, Representative Colin Allred, he's a pretty cool dude, pretty inspirational figure, honestly, like former NFL player. I think he's an attorney. Now he's in the House of Representatives. Pretty cool dude. But still like polling consistently behind Cruz. Still, we're talking about Texas, and he's not really mounting the kind of like groundswell like campaign that we saw from O'Rourke that like didn't quite make it, but almost did. The only thing that I'm curious about is if like the most recent polls that I've seen about this race were prior to Biden dropping out. And I'm really curious if Harris at the top of the ticket helps sway people and encourage more active turnout. Like it's one thing if you're like resigned to like Biden losing, especially in a consistently red state. I feel like it's another thing if you've got two people of color at the top of the ticket, you've got a more inspirational kind of perspective. You've got, and now at the top of the ticket, I mean like Harris and then Allred. And I think there might be more stuff going for it. I think you're ultimately probably right that Texas is not there yet, despite its recent trend. But I don't know. I think it's almost definitely going Republican, but it's heading in the right direction.
Here is a bold prediction I will make.
Whoa.
And this could be wrong, but based on current trends, here is my prediction. This is going to be the last time that Ted Cruz is reelected.
Whoa. Pretty huge.
I think that in 6 years, Texas will be there, but it is not there yet. So that's those are the likely states. Let's talk about the lean states. Let's start with the lean Republican states. That's all of them. Let's talk about the lean Democrat states.
Okay, yeah. This is interesting. Who do you have on your map for a lean Democrat? Yeah.
For lean Democrat, let's start with Arizona. Do you have that as lean Democrat for yours?
I moved that into the likely Democrat category.
Really? That's likely Democrat. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you say likely and not lean?
Okay. All right. So for those who don't know, we've got in Arizona, we've got Kyrsten Sinema's seat, who is now an independent, but previously caucused with the Democrats. She's now running again for re-election. So the race is Ruben Gallego, who is a current in the House of Representatives, versus Kari Lake,
who everybody hates.
So we have 270 win has this as a toss-up. I'm calling it safe for Democrats. Sounds like Nathan's calling it lean for Democrats. Honestly, it's based on having a reasonable candidate in Ruben Gallego. We've got a veteran, son of Latino immigrants, first in his family to go to college, went to Harvard, like overall, like pretty compelling candidate in a lot of ways. In a state that seems to like compelling candidates, sending Mark Kelly, like overall, like Arizona is not a crazy far right MAGA state. And then on the other side of the ticket, you have Kari Lake, who is, most famous for her like ultra crazy stop the steal, like, moves for trying to bring erroneous, election related claims in the courts. Literally, the chair of the Arizona Republican Party tried to bribe her not to run.
Yeah.
Literally said, like, is there a job that could keep you from running, or is there like a number that would cause you to drop out? So like clearly the Republican Party thinks that she's a liability. I don't think there's anything structurally in the state that means that it's like that any Republican candidate can win, and Gallego seems like a pretty compelling candidate. So those are my reasons.
Yeah, I would say I think it's going to go to Gallego. I think it's going to be close. And that's why I'm saying lean. I think he is going to win because you're right. They've tried to run Lake before.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't gone well because they don't like her. She tried to defraud the state, honestly.
Yeah. And there's like good evidence that she tried to defraud. Like like her scheme was entirely bald-faced, and everybody knows that she literally tried to like destroy votes. Like, yeah.
Next up, so we both agree that that's probably going to go to Gallego, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about Michigan, because I think Michigan, I would say, based on polling and based on trends,
yeah,
I think an argument could be made for likely, but I'm going to keep it in the lean category. I don't like saying likely if the polling is like below 8 on average.
I see that. I understand that.
And right now, the Real Clear Politics average for Slotkin is plus 5.8, which is still pretty damn good. Like, that is still pretty damn good. That means I think it is very, very probably going to be Slotkin.
Yeah.
But, I think it's worth noting that that it's not safe per se.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have that in likely, and here's why. I know. So her lead has been consistent in Michigan across polls for like a few months. Like a ton of polls are showing her consistently in that +5, a couple show +8, one shows +10, like in that up category. Yeah. Almost all of these polls are conducted prior to Biden dropping out. And I don't want to say that that's going to change every single race, but in a race like Michigan, I feel like it could. And not having to distance
I agree
yourself.
with you.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you because there was a poll that came out recently that showed Kamala ahead by like 10 points in Michigan.
Yeah.
And if Kamala's ahead by like 10 points in Michigan, then usually, not always, but usually the senator, the incumbent senator, outperforms the president usually. Yeah. So I think you're probably right there.
Yeah. So that's why I think like while based on just the numbers alone, I probably do lean Democrats. I think those are lagging the trends that we're seeing in other places, and so I'm nudging it over into the likely Democrat category. But maybe I'm just an optimist.
Okay, maybe. I think that a similar case can probably be made for Pennsylvania and Wisconsin to be put in the likely category. Both of them, so Casey in Pennsylvania has a +6 average, and Baldwin in Wisconsin have a +6. So again, the only reason why I'm saying lean and not likely is because I don't put them into that category unless it's like 8. But I think that there's a good chance that both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania stay blue for this one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's also a little bit difficult to tell exactly because like we've got a Republican primary that hasn't wrapped up yet in the state. And so, while she seems to be polling ahead of her likely challenger, Eric Hovde, by, 4, 10 points, depending on the poll, and there has been some kind of upward trajectory across her recent polls. We'll see how that shakes out once we have an actual firm challenger in the seat.
Yeah. I think the closest one that I think that I would put in the lean Democrat category would be Nevada. The current incumbent is Jackie Rosen. As it stands, she does have a +4 average, and she has actually been ahead in every single poll that has been conducted that shows up on 538.
Yeah.
On top of that, if you look at her approval rating, in the state, because I think that's another good good compelling sort of test.
Yeah.
Her approval has actually spiked recently. She has a 53 approval rating and
Wow.
a 31 disapproval rating.
Hmm.
So although I put this in the lean category, I think it's going to Rosen.
Yeah, I think I group that in a little bit of the same trajectory as Michigan, where you've got like the specific voters who Biden struggled with, like he would underperform with and kind of bring down enthusiasm in the state, bring down turnout, that kind of thing. Harris is likely going to do better with. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I think overall we're starting to see that movement. And so I think hopefully we're going to see a bit of a buoying effect from having Harris at the top of the ticket instead of Biden, which can help benefit Rosen. But yeah, I have that lean Democrat as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about Ohio. Ohio is an interesting one. Yeah. Ohio is a very interesting one because Ohio has been trending crimson red.
In every way.
And yet, the incumbent, Sherrod Brown, continues to be extremely popular. So his approval rating is only 49%, but his disapproval rating is only 34%. So
wow.
Not many people disapprove of him.
Yeah. He's also been in the position since 2006. They have put him back in his seat, so many times, regardless of how the state is trended.
Yeah. Also, according to The Hill, his average polling has shown him at a 4.8 lead.
Yeah.
I still put this somewhat in a toss-up category because I'm having flashbacks to the 2018 election where there were a lot of those Midwestern states that were red, where like in Indiana and Missouri, where you saw on average the Democratic incumbents were maintaining a lead, but they did end up going to the Republican because we're just getting to the point where the days of the Senate kind of being like the Senate races kind of being less of an indication or less connected to national politics, that those days are starting to come to a close.
Yeah. And yeah, one thing, as like if you look at his challenger as well, who's just like a businessman named Bernie Moreno, if you look at like who he is, I don't think Republicans have like slapped themselves in the face with this candidate the way they sometimes do in these kinds of races. So like he seems to be running, at least based on his website, as kind of a classic economic conservative with just a little bit of MAGA kind of sprinkled in. So honestly, like in a state trending that has been solidly red, but has a like Democrat incumbent in the seat, I could see a kind of classic conservative, especially in that part of the country where like he can argue that it's, that he is as much of a like a labor populist as like Sherrod would be, and kind of argue for Ohio and jobs and all that stuff. I could see that being appealing. And yeah, that could be a threat.
Yeah. I do think if we're gonna make a prediction though, I do think Brown keeps it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have it. Yeah, on my map, I have it lean Democrat, not a toss-up, but we'll see. Yeah.
That brings us to the biggest toss-up of the entire race, which if Michael and I are right, which it sounds like we haven't agreed, or we haven't disagreed on who we ultimately think is going to win any of them.
Yeah.
Control of the Senate will come down to this state. And that is Montana.
Drum roll, man. This is crazy.
Montana. Yeah. So yes, red Montana has a Democratic senator and has had a Democratic senator for, I believe, 3 election cycles.
Yeah. Jon Tester has held his seat since 2007. It's crazy. But
Yes.
we'll see if that continues.
Yeah. So here's the thing. This is, I am fairly certain that this is going to be the race that determines who controls the Senate. And for that reason, I don't understand why the fuck there hasn't been more polling in Montana.
Seriously, there's like one poll. It's like from 4 months ago. It's crazy.
Well, so you can find more polls on the Hill, but here's the thing. Most of the pollsters are kind of terrible.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
most of the pollsters are like the Republican Party.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, if you do the average of the polls that the Hill has collected, you find that Sheehy, I think that's how you say his name, is leading Tester by 4 points.
Yeah.
But the problem is, most of those pollsters are Republican PACs or like the Republican Party or Republican campaigns.
Or like Trump's polling firm. Yeah, totally.
Like there are some older ones like Emerson, which had Tester up by 2, but that was done in March.
Yeah.
And Survey USA, which I'm not even familiar with that has Tester up by 10. But that was done in February. So like, I don't think you can really, I don't know if there's really much to say about that.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's hard to get a feel for where this race is at because the polling is not really there isn't a lot of polling, and also the Republican, nobody fucking knows him.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knows who this guy. He is just a dude, basically. Like, he is just a dude that was friends with some people in the Montana Republican Party who also happened to be a millionaire who decided to run. But literally nobody knows anything about this guy.
But he's got an R next to his name. So that's
But he's got an R
means.
next to his name.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best piece of actual data that we can look at is approval rating for Tester, because I think that's going to be that's going to be one thing that is going to that it's going to come down to, because the thing is, nobody even knows how to pronounce this guy's name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it again. I don't even know how to pronounce this guy's name, but everybody knows Tester. Everybody knows Tester. And Morning Consult average shows his approval rating at 53%, disapproval at 42%. So that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that is pretty good. That is pretty good.
The issue is, it has been trending down. Like in the third quarter of 2023, his approval was 61% and disapproval was 32%. So it has been trending down. And I think that the reason why it's been trending down is probably because there are a significant amount of Republicans in the state of Montana that are realizing, like, this, I like this guy, but this race is about control of the Senate. And I think that the more people in Montana that view the race as this is a race for the control of the Senate, the more you're probably going to be seeing people that, maybe they like Tester, but they're like, I like tax cuts for the rich more.
Yeah, that's a common issue that really gets people out to vote. So it does seem like the polling has Sheehy up by 5 or so points, but yet we think it's a toss-up. And is that just because Tester's got name ID? Polling is not super robust here. There's still a lot of time and money going into the area. Is that what we're thinking? This is still
and also because
race.
And also because Tester is still fairly popular.
Sure, and she has super low name ID as opposed to Tester's high name ID. Yeah, I guess we shall see. I mean,
Well, I'm putting it in the toss-up category, but let's still try to predict it, because the thing is, this will determine if all of our other predictions are correct. This will determine who ends up winning the Senate. Well, this will determine who wins the Senate if Democrats take the White House.
Yes.
Because this will put us at an even 50-50.
Yep.
All right.
Which is best case scenario, even 50-50. This is a rough spot.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I will say as a little bit of hope, if we do get 50-50, we're going to have 50-50 without Manchin and Sinema,
Yes.
which means we might actually be able to get some stuff done that we weren't able to get done under the Biden administration. That is assuming we win the House, which I think there's a much better chance of us winning the House than us winning the Senate.
Yeah, and assuming that we don't have any other, sticks in the mud like Manchin and Sinema who flew under the radar, or if they were already in the Senate, and or who don't enter the Senate as part of this. But yeah,
honestly, at that point, I think most likely the new Manchin and Sinema is probably going to be Tester and Warner.
Yeah, I can believe that.
But we'll see. So, Michael, gun to your head, who do you think wins?
I mean, probably Sheehy. I think it goes Republican, and here's why. If I put high name ID against low name ID, but polling is favoring the low name ID person, to me that indicates that there is general dissatisfaction with the incumbent, such that even without knowing who the other person is, there's like movement in that favor. Now, I think that could like change with enough investment and time, but like, gun to my head today, that I think people like based on the polling and based on the name ID factors kind of in isolation, I think people are going against Tester as a default. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sheehy, Teehee, whatever the fuck his name is, I think he wins. I think that control of the Senate, unfortunately, goes back to Republicans.
Wow. So, unfortunately, as exciting as this was, nothing surprising came out of it. We agreed on all of the outcomes. The only things we disagreed on are whether we thought it was safe, likely, or lean.
Well,
and
also if we're right, it's really not going to be that exciting of an election because only 2 seats are going to flip if we're right. And one of them, you can't even really call it a flip. It's West Virginia. Like,
totally. That's pricey.
But like the fact that we're all just going to be, again, this is assuming that we were right about the other states. This is assuming that we're right about Ohio. The fact that on election night, not only am I going to be like obsessively watching, the presidential national election, but I will be obsessed. I'll have another tab open on all of the counties in Montana watching that race.
Totally. Oh, absolutely, dude. I that's actually one of my favorite parts about election night. I'm kind of getting excited now, as scary as it is going to be. Like, it is such an exciting time. And I love watching the county by county election tracker. You're like, okay, we got 50% of the vote in, this person's up by 6 points. Like, but this one area in the county is not reporting yet. This district is more blue. Like, we can do some pickups there. That's so fun. So that'll be a good time. And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good every week?
Well, Michael, I'm so glad you asked. We do Tips for Good every week because, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do.
All right, well, audience, I think Nathan is currently experiencing an episode of something.
Was that an autism joke?
A break. No, it was a stroke joke, but I didn't know if we had any recent stroke survivors in the audience. I didn't want to offend anybody, but I think he's short-circuiting, which makes the world a worse place.
That does make the world a worse place. But good news, I'm not actually short-circuiting.
Oh.
I'm just I'm quoting Taylor Swift.
Oh. She really is the lyricist of our generation.
She is. Yeah, that's some deep lyrics right there.
Really just amazing. Shakespearean, honestly.
I mean, I like Taylor Swift well and good. I do think it's funny how Zoomers are trying to claim her when she is definitely our generation.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Like, they're like, oh, yeah, we discovered Taylor Swift. We were all Taylor Swift. It's like, motherfucker, I've been listening to Taylor Swift since I was in middle school.
Yeah. Way before you were born, Zoomers. Yeah.
Yeah. Something something world's a better place. I guess I don't know. I think Taylor Swift's music probably makes the world a better place.
Yeah, I
I
think that's
guess.
right.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's good
absolutely.
music, right?
Yeah, it's good music. Her followers are enthusiastic and nice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's nice to have someone whose fans are nice, like, and
Yeah.
not assholes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, can you
Although-
imagine like
although-
Joe Rogan listeners like showing up with like bracelets and shit and exchanging
Yeah.
kumbayas at his shows? No.
Although try saying anything like remotely critical about Taylor Swift in a classroom full of Zoomers
Sure.
and see how quickly public opinion
The tide
turns against you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And that's tips for good. No.
So anyway, let's just skip right to the whole making the world a better place. So
Good
Michael,
idea.
what is
Get right
our
to
tip
that.
for good this week?
All right, guys. This is a tough one. Normally, we like to do tips for good. We like to pick things that are like fairly easy, fairly straightforward. You can keep it in mind and make the world a better place. This one is harder, but it's important. You have a right to have a good faith estimate of how much a medical procedure is going to cost you before you get charged for it. Because like somehow that was a revolutionary thing when that was passed as a law. But my God, like the fact that you can spend the equivalent of a car but not have any idea that you're going to spend the equivalent of a car until like after the fact, that seems pretty fucking dumb. Your doctor will almost certainly not be able to tell you. So that's the first thing. When you're sitting in the room, they're not going to be able to tell you. The person that you talk to is scheduling will probably not be able to tell you. The finance department might be able to point you in the right direction. A combination of your insurance provider, the finance department at the hospital, or whatever the network is, should be able to give you a good faith estimate of the billing cost and then ultimately your responsibility for those costs. It will be a pain in the ass. It's important.
Yeah.
Like, especially, like, I've been going to the doctor more this year because I now have a doctor and decided that it's probably a good idea for me to go to the doctor. Everything costs literally 10 times more than you think it would be. So ask ahead of time, get an estimate, try to figure it out ahead of time before any procedures actually happen. Because no matter how bad you think it will be more expensive.
Yeah.
So figure that out, shop around, do your due diligence ahead of time. It will be a pain in the ass, but it can really be important. And you have a right to know.
And that's tips for good.
So for our next segment, we are talking about DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Republicans have been on their high fucking horse about DEI for a few years now. This has become like a boogeyman for them. The implication of DEI for Republicans is basically that certain people get the stuff that you, white Christian, primarily men, should be entitled to, and they're only getting it over you, because you're really more qualified than they are, because of diversity, equity, inclusion programs, which of course elevate race and sex above all else when making decisions. And, so any job that you didn't get as a white dude is only because they gave it to someone else. Even though you were qualified, they gave it to someone else because they weren't a white dude. And any college that you didn't get into, they just replaced you with someone who is more diverse. And so it is a honestly really boring and classic form of like racist, sexist, scapegoating grievance politics designed to make the people who have historically had more than anyone else in U.S. history feel like the real bad guy is not only like other races, other classes, immigrants and women, but also now liberal elitists. And they can combine all that stuff and try to make the claim that it's really about fairness and hard work and American values. And it is the classic switcheroo, right? When really what people are feeling and getting caught up in is the thresher of wealth inequality, corporate greed in the midst of the perpetual growth-based economic system that we have, combined with stagnant wages and rising costs. And rather than addressing any of those things, like Progressive Democrat Democratic candidates try to do. They are aiming their base at like historically marginalized communities and elite and people that they refer to as elites, and wrapping it all up in DEI programs who are really the enemy. And all of that is bullshit.
It is all bullshit. And I also feel like a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats, a lot of people that push for the use of DEI are terrible at making the affirmative case for it.
They are so bad. That's the yeah. I totally agree with you. Like,
and
yeah.
I would argue that the big reason for it, unfortunately, is that for a lot of them, it's just theater.
Yeah.
Like for a lot of businesses that do like, you know, participate in DEI training programs, they do it so that they say they did.
Yeah.
You know, for Democrats that like, you know, say, oh, we love diversity, we support diversity and all that. I feel like a lot of them, it's for political favors.
Sure.
And that's really sad because, you know, a lot of Republicans will make that argument that they're just doing it like it's performative politics or whatever. But that's really sad because there actually are a lot of good, compelling cases to be made about the importance of pushes towards DEI. The problem is when the motivation is less about the spirit of DEI and more about the image of DEI.
Yes. Yeah.
Then they're often not as effective.
Yeah.
They're often not as effective at fighting bias, and they're often not as effective at actually encouraging diversity.
Totally. And they fall into at least one, like two of the traps that Republicans capitalize on.
Yeah.
One is that they quickly can inadvertently become like hyper race conscious and sex conscious activities. Like rather than like clearing the path and enabling people to like do well, you know, it can be pretty like it's easier to make the claim from a Republican perspective that it's just because of like race. But the other thing is that it narrows to focus on the aspects of diversity that are visible. So you can visibly claim that you are, you know, have a diverse, that you are benefiting diversity, that you are valuing diversity, as opposed to like the incredibly like wide range of human experiences and diversity that gives rise to all of the benefits or many of the benefits that we get from it as a society. Not only that the people who are like part of those diverse communities receive as well. Yeah.
Like I was looking at some of the counter arguments to DEI, and I stumbled across this Heritage article. And most of it was bullshit, but there was actually one point that they made that I thought was a decent point, which is the fact that oftentimes DEI programs kind of create a monolith of people of color.
Yep.
And that fails to take into account the fact that various different people don't necessarily represent every single experience of a person of color.
Yes.
They looked at the example of Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
You know, she is, you know, her parents were Jamaican and Indian. So there's a lot of separate sort of experiences that go into both of those, both in terms of, you know, maybe the culture that she was raised with, or, you know, some of the experience that she might have had in life that cannot be separated out into a box.
Yeah.
You know, so the problem then comes when you, that they'll often, one of the arguments that they'll often make, the problem then comes is the fact that because you are taking race in general into account, and in this case, race as just an example of not being the majority, you kind of denigrate those individual experiences. And that is true enough. But here's the thing. There are sets of shared experiences that all marginalized groups have, both racial minorities, you disability minorities, sexual minorities, that all minorities have, there are some shared experiences that are actually commonly held. The biggest one being the fact that there are institutions that were not set up for you,
Yes.
that were not set up for people like you.
Yeah.
One of the biggest examples that I can give from my own point of view as someone with a disability, someone on the autism spectrum, is the fact that institutions are not created to accommodate a person who is on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was being hired to my current job, one of the questions that they asked me was about specifically DEI, commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. And I talked about the fact that even before this job, I had encountered many experiences in the classroom where there were other students who were on the autism spectrum who had never had a teacher who was on the autism spectrum. And just the fact that they had someone there who was able to share their experiences meant that they felt more comfortable coming to me during office hours and talking about like, hey, I don't know how to navigate this. Like, I'm having this issue at this school. How do I navigate this? I'm concerned about this. I was, I've even had even with this job, I've even had people on the autism spectrum come and talk to me during office hours, specifically saying, specifically just asking, how do you social with people? Because I don't know how to social with people. And we've literally just sat in my office and chatted about ways of kind of allowing yourself to get out there, allowing yourself to become more social in a college environment, which as a communication professor, that's a really important perspective for me to have. So the thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the straw man that the right will often create is that this will happen, like the standard of DEI is race, gender, marginalized status above all else, fuck qualifications.
Yeah.
And I would say that when that does happen, that can be, to the extent that that happens, that's understandably something to be concerned about, but that's not what it's about.
Exactly. That's a misapplication of the thing.
Yeah.
It's a
It's
mistake.
not about elevating it.
Yeah.
It's about taking it into account, considering it a factor. Because the fact of the matter is, there are not a lot of openly autistic people in the communication department, which, big fucking shocker. Honestly, it's a running joke that I tell in my class that I have a disability that affects my ability to communicate. So naturally, I thought I should become a fucking communication professor. But the thing is, people who struggle with communication, particularly people on the autism spectrum, highly benefit from having a teacher who shares those same struggles and is able to, number one, I mean, most of the people I work with are neurotypicals, so I'm able to talk to the neurotypical students. I'm able to teach in a way that appeals to them, but I'm also able to do it in a way that appeals to people on the spectrum because I take that into account.
Yeah.
The problem is you often have professors that, to no fault of their own, they don't even think about that. They don't even think about changing their teaching abilities or teaching teaching methodologies in order to account for people. I've given talks at my school to neurotypical professors where I've laid things out, and I've discussed things that they never would have even thought of.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I was able to do that is because I have that experience. Now, I can't tell you how much, I don't know how much that was taken into account. When I was hired, I can tell you that I know for a fact, and I feel like I probably can't say why, but I know for a fact that me being autistic was not the end all be all that got me the job. And I know that for a fact, for a very specific reason that I feel like I can't share, but I know it for a fact. But it does still impact my ability to do my job in a positive way. Sure. And it does come with benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about it like this, and I'd love for you to like correct me or disagree if you think about this differently. So I know you've thought about this way more than I have. Like diversity is about having like representation of all kinds of people. Equity is about like enabling fair like outcomes for people. Like outcomes being that you distribute resources and attention in a way that enables people from diverse backgrounds to have that background not be outcome determinative. So there's no longer a guarantee that one identity means one outcome. And then inclusion is like, this meeting people where they need to be met in order to like help drive these positive opportunities and outcomes for people. And overall, I think like, as I think about the like real world application of this stuff is about accessibility for like diverse people and diverse outcomes. And that is how you go about including people and doing it in a proactive and thoughtful way. So it's like something like an example that I think about periodically is like red, green color blindness. I'm not colorblind. I know you are. Yeah, I know you are. I work with someone who's colorblind. And so many of like the charts that we make have red and green.
Yeah.
All of them, because red is bad, green is good, and we are constantly talking about things going well and going poorly. And so so every chart is unreadable.
Yeah.
And like what we lose is that person's perspective on this concept we're discussing. And so like it's not like from someone who is just so solidly average and in the mainstream. Like like I'm an average height, I fit on a plane, like pretty average, like intelligence, I'm white, I'm a dude, like all of the things in America were made for me. And and I benefit tremendously from these things. Because like I not only do I get the benefit of someone who's red, green, colorblind and their perspective, but like by taking all of these things into account, we all get like halo benefits from this stuff. Not only by elevating people of different perspectives and being able to understand and like being able to benefit from those different backgrounds and perspectives, but also things like fucking like putting a ramp in a curb.
Yeah.
Right? I think this is a classic example. Putting a ramp in a curb doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
What it does is it enables people in wheelchairs to participate fully in life and society and be able to move down the street. They can shop, they can interact with people, all this stuff in a more full way. It is easy, it is a benefit. And you know who else benefits? Anybody that is on wheels. All of a sudden, parents with strollers are able to get on the street. Like we have this halo effect of widening our perspective to include all of these people. And like and diversity and inclusion and equity and accessibility are all tied up together in people that aren't the representatives of those communities being proactive about thinking about them and taking them into account and being inclusive. And then people who are members of those marginalized communities being able to benefit, and then also being able to benefit all of us by representing themselves. Yeah. It's such a virtuous cycle.
Because the fact of the matter is, obviously, we do not want to treat somebody differently because of their race, but we often do. Like, we are, in many ways, biologically predispositioned to feel more comfortable when we talk to people that look like ourselves. Now, here's the thing. There are ways of fighting against that. Mm-hmm. There are ways of fighting against that implicit bias.
Yes.
The best way of fighting against that implicit bias is exposure and interaction with that which you have an implicit bias against. Mm-hmm. So if you find yourself much more comfortable talking to, say, white people than black people, the more you actually spend time interacting with people that go beyond, that go beyond just white people, the more you start to do away with that. The more you start to get rid of that bias.
Yeah.
You know, hell, I used to be much more comfortable talking to autistics because neurotypicals are just fucking weird. But the more I interacted with neurotypicals, the more I started realizing, oh, some of them have something to say. So the point the point is, diversity, equity, and inclusion benefits not just the person who is being included, but also the people around them because they're being exposed to different perspectives.
Yeah.
And also, there's evidence to suggest that it benefits companies as a whole. There was actually a study that was done from professors from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Vanderbilt University, and Florida Atlantic University back in 2001 that took a look at basically the productivity and the financial success of various different firms that had more diversity versus less diversity. And they actually found that just a 1% increase in racial diversity between both upper and lower management positions increased the firm's productivity by between $729 per employee per year and $1,590. So just by increasing your diversity by 1%, your racial diversity by 1%, you saw an increase in the amount of capital that individual employees were able to gain because more people were able to approach it from more perspectives. Now this was published in 2001. It was a survey done from a bunch of U.S. computer-based companies with more than 100 employees, and this was between the years 2007 and 2011. And they also looked at Fortune 500 firms within the same period, basically finding similar results.
Yeah.
So what they found also was that the benefits were maximized when that diversity was present in both the upper management and the lower management.
Yes.
But even if it was just in the upper management, or even if it was just in the lower management, it still had a significant increase in productivity. So not only is actually doing diversity, equity, and inclusion in an honest way, in a representative way, in a non-theatrical way, not only does it, help to give opportunities to groups that have historically been denied those opportunities, it's profitable.
Yeah, totally. I want to go back to a couple points that you made, because I think this really is a critical point to tying the value of DEI to the philosophy of DEI, to the politics of DEI, and back into the Republican perspective. You made a joke like, oh yeah, eventually I came around and neurotypicals are okay, which I think is implicitly a really critical part of making the politics of the political case for DEI. Because the reason why this is getting traction with the Republican base is because they don't view themselves as part of the people benefiting from this move. They don't view them, and so we've made the case for the people being included being benefited, the people around them being benefited, companies being benefited, but they don't believe it. They're not seeing it. And which I think leads us to the political case that has to be made and the way that Democrats have to talk about it. I think so. Stacey Abrams was on Pod Save America, and I think she did a great job talking about DEI. She said, quote, "Diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core values of this country. Diversity is all people, equity means access to opportunity, and inclusion means a pathway for all Americans." And then she went on to talk about people like J.D. Vance. She didn't mention J.D. Vance by name, but she specifically talked about people growing up in poor Appalachia.
Yeah.
And where if you went to a Title I school And Title I is basically a elementary and secondary education component of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which provides supplemental financial assistance to schools in low-income areas. So if you're someone like J.D. Vance, who grew up in a poor area in Appalachia, going to one of these schools, you have benefited directly from DEI programs.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being in college and hearing a fellow student who was from like a very rural part of Southern Virginia talk about how, and I knew a few students talk, and I heard a few students talk about how they worked really hard when they got to college to lose their accent so that they could seem smarter among their fellow students.
Yeah.
DEI values help support those identities, help mitigate those feelings of shame, help enable people's pride in themselves, their family, their heritage, and all of the things that Republicans try to claim for white people can be present in the actual value of diversity and the actual valuing of diversity and the proactive inclusion of diverse groups.
Yeah. And that's a really good point that I think that we've actually made on the pod before, which is the fact that one of the groups that we really do need to be spending some time considering when it comes to DEI is poor people, is people of a lower socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
That needs to be considered a part of a marginalized identity. And when you acknowledge that, whether a person is black or white, if they're living in poverty, then that means the system has failed them.
Yes.
Now, you also need to acknowledge the fact that there are definitely intersecting areas of oppression when someone is poor and black or poor and Latino. And you also need to acknowledge the fact that a significantly higher percentage of black people live in poverty versus white people. It's about approximately 11% of white people versus nearly a quarter of or a fifth of black people. That's not okay. That represents an institutional problem that in many ways is a result of generational barriers that have kept black people behind. And trying to make up for those, trying to remove those institutional barriers is an essential part of that DEI mission. So we need to acknowledge that sometimes when DEI is put out there by like corporations or by Democrats, it is sometimes performative. But it can't be, because there truly is inherent value into making sure that we are including multiple perspectives, not at the expense of qualification. All right?
Yeah.
But taking it as a factor so we can have multiple voices in our institutions, in our educational institutions, in our work environments, and our government.
So now it's time for one of our favorite segments, Ass Hat of the Week.
So, Michael, who is our ass hat this week?
Okay, well, normally he's not allowed to be the ass hat because he would be the ass hat every week.
Yeah. Well,
but
he was the ass hat of our life.
He
remember?
was, and he remains that. But this week was just too juicy. Too good not to make.
You said too in too much of a Trump voice, and then you said juicy, and I felt my skin crawl. I felt like spiders were crawling up my back.
It's too juicy.
Oh God.
Grandma juicy. Oh no.
Oh,
that's the worst thing I've ever said in my whole life. Anyway, so it's Donald Trump.
Speaking of the grossest thing in my entire life.
Yeah, seriously. Things have gotten rough. Okay, so Donald Trump.
So what did Donnie Boy do?
Donald Trump got a bit of a surprise. He was invited by the National Association of Black Journalists to a chat in Chicago. And I think he thought that this was an invitation because he is just polling so well with the black community. It wasn't. And it was much more and much more confrontational than I think he was really prepared for at the time, which just went so well. Like literally everything he said, like they were gasping and laughing and like it was amazing. So we're going to go through a few of these things. We're going to start with the one that really got him on our show.
By the way, I purposely have not read any of this or seen any of this because I wanted to react in real time to Michael. So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know that Trump and his cronies are trying to label Harris as a DEI hire. At this particular event, again, in front of the National Association of Black Journalists, he says, quote, "She was always of Indian heritage, and she was always promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know. Is she Indian or is she black? I respect either one, but obviously she obviously doesn't because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person." Going on to say that we should really look into this.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Jon Stewart literally did like a reaction to like some idiot on Newsmax that said something similar.
Yeah.
Where it was like, these fucking idiots, if they saw like one of those Pizza Hut Taco Bells, it would blow their minds.
Honestly, that's so. And
Okay,
what point? What
one of her parents is
upside?
Jamaican. One of her parents is Indian. You can be fucking both.
I know.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. Yeah. What possible
Oh my
upside could there
God.
be by trying
my
to
God.
pretend
He
like she can
actually said
only be
that?
Indian or black?
He actually said that.
He actually said all of
He
that.
actually said, oh my God. Oh my, like I honestly thought like, it was just going to be one of those, regular Trumpy
Overblown,
things
yeah.
where there's overblown. It's like, oh, he was speaking out of his ass. He probably said something kind of stupid,
Nope.
but it was like an offhand thing. Holy shit. She became black?
She turned
became
black.
She
Yeah.
turned black.
Exactly.
What did you?
What does he try to do? Just be like trying to convince black voters that she's not black enough for their vote? Like, I really don't know what the upside is here. Like, who the fuck? Okay. So that's what got him on our show, but we have to keep going a little bit.
Oh God, more?
Dude,
There's more?
He was in this room being asked questions by a moderator and
Oh my God.
by the audience, and he was just allowed to talk. It's the worst possible thing. Okay. So first question when he gets this Kamala Harris comment was not the first thing that he said. The first question that he gets when he steps on the stage, which I love that they come out, that like this event came out swinging because like they didn't pull any punches. It was great. So the first question from the panel was basically about like why black voters should trust Trump as a former president when he has used language such as animal, rabbit, and loser to describe black politicians and journalists, right? So that's the basic crux of the question. And he goes, well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. The first question, you don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And yeah, so basically
God.
he went on to say like, I think that's a nasty question. He went on to say that he's the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln.
God, my 8-month-old daughter doesn't cry like that.
Well, so on its face, obviously that's just whiny. The deeper thing is like, why aren't these people like deferring to me? I'm in a room of black professional journalists, and why are they? How dare they be rude to me? I feel like to me it reeks of like the trope of like a someone being mouthy or something like that. Like this is I just think it's so fucked up.
You know what I tell my students when the first question you should ask yourself when preparing for a speech, before you even decide what you're going to talk about, the first question you always ask yourself, always, is who is my audience? Analyze your audience. Bro, go back to fucking college and take a basic ass communication course because like that
Yeah, totally. Okay, this is
Jesus.
my favorite one. He goes, again, this is the National Association of Black Journalists. He goes, a lot of journalists in this room are black. The audience bursts out laughing and gasping. He goes on to say, I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. A moderator asks him, what is a black job? And he's like, he stumbles and goes, a black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. They're taking the employment away from black people. Yeah. He just like, it was amazing.
I mean, I don't know if that one's as much racist as just stupid. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole black job. I think someone else had said something like that. Earlier in the camp. I don't remember who. There's someone else that made a comment about black jobs that drew a lot of public ire. And the fact that he's bringing that back up in a room full of black journalists, God, he's such a
And
dumbass.
which jobs? Which jobs is he talking about? That's the thing. Like, it's a classic grievance politics, but to your point, he just is not thinking about who his audience is. He's doing the same old Trump thing and trying to like pretend like the things that he says to every audience applies.
It's like are undocumented immigrants coming in and becoming journalists?
Exactly,
Because,
taking journalist jobs. Like, is that what we're worried about? Yeah, it's just like his whole thing was he's such a bumbling buffoon, so fucking offensive. And
you know what I think a black job is, Michael? What? You know what I think a black job is? At least,
President of the United fucking States of America, baby.
Exactly. In the context of this election, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, congratulations to Donnie Trump Sr. for being this week's
Ass Hat of the Week.
And now we will end our show as we usually do with our highlights. So, Nathan, what's your highlight this week?
My highlight this week is that my local library has this Mother Goose time that is in the morning that you can bring your kid to, and my wife and I took our daughter to it for the first time, and we saw a bunch of kids, bunch of babies. We got to see our daughter around people her age. And it was so cute. It was so nice. And, I felt like an actual parent. Like that's the thing. It still blows my mind sometimes that I'm an actual parent. Like I've been one for 8 months and it still surprises me. But, it was like, the people there come up, they'd be like, "Oh, isn't your daughter cute?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, my daughter. Holy shit, my daughter." Like, I don't know. It's just such a beautiful thing. IVF is a beautiful, amazing thing that let us have these experiences. So, don't ever forget that shit when you hear the fact that like only 2 Republicans voted to protect IVF nationwide.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you, Michael? What's your highlight?
My highlight, I think, is like, honestly, wait, I might have done this already this last week, but I'm going to do it again if I did. I've been going to the gym and I have a personal trainer, and it's been so nice. Like, my mood is like noticeably improved. I'm like looking forward to it. Like every day. It's just been very, very pleasant. It like
Nice.
yeah, I always have a little bit of a hard time like getting into like quote unquote self-care as like a thing. I just don't like most of the things that people do as self-care that I'm aware of. Just like I don't experience them as like, you know, mentally beneficial. This like really is. It's been absolutely wonderful. So
Nice,
that's my
nice.
highlight.
Glad to hear, brother.
And now we'll thank all the amazing people that make this show possible. So thank you to our patrons, Jerry DeViller, Kyle Chaska, Fade Out Scoop, Taylor Bloom, and Tobias Janssen. Thank you to our incredible editor, Kayla, for all they do to put this show on. And thank you to you, dear listener, for listening to The Perspectrum. And you'll hear from us again next week.